We're taking a look at the fourth trumpet in this video, and the way that I'm being led to do this, well, I'll read the fourth trumpet to you first. The fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them turned dark. A third of the day was without light, and also a third of the night. That's the fourth trumpet, and I just want to remind you that in the trumpets, only a third of the sea, only a third of the stars, a third of the moon, okay? In the bowls of wrath, it's in their entirety. You don't see that language. So people who are saying that the trumpets and the bowls of wrath are the same are not having that understanding. In addition to the fact that before the bowls of wrath, John sees a sea of glass, and standing by it, those who have been victorious over the mark of the beast and its image and the beast. If they've been victorious, they endured till the end, which means that they are no longer here. So it's clear that the resurrection has already taken place by the time those bowls of wrath are here. So just in case there's anyone on this channel who has ingested that false doctrine, I want to make it very clear, the bowls of wrath will not happen until after the resurrection. Does that mean God's going to pick us up before his great wrath? No. We know that God is going to bring his great wrath for 45 days between the 1290th day and the 1335th day in Daniel 12. The other thing I want to say before we get started is I haven't been mentioning the Bible study as I had mentioned that I would for the next few days. So we already have a good group. We have enough people in the group for, to justify doing a Bible study. Usually my kind of rule of thumb is, okay, if I've got, 2 or 3, because where 2 or more are gathered, right? So we have plenty of people that want to do it. And so we got a good group going. I might end up breaking it into 2 just because of wanting to get schedules together, because some people are able to do it in the morning. We've got people in different countries, different time zones. And so our morning is their evening. So we have to kind of schedule it that way. So I may end up breaking it into 2, but you are still welcome to join. I want to make sure that you know that we're doing the Bible study, that it is free of charge. No one has to pay for anything. This is not a ministry that is only for those who are able to pay. So let people know. Let people know that there is healing that is available to them, that God has given them shepherds who are not taking anything from them, who are here to do God's work and are not serving both God and money. Because no one should be prohibited from receiving healing or understanding. Okay, so we're going to get into this fourth trumpet. So a third of the sun, moon, and stars are struck, so that a third of each turned dark, and a third of the day was without light, and also a third of the night. I want to just mention something that I am considering, but God has to reveal this if this is something that's going on. But God did separate the day, the light from the dark, the day from the night, and that is defining time. So I don't know if time ends up being altered by this. So I'm just kind of earmarking that. The way that I'm being led to approach this is to look up all of the verses that talk about the darkening of the sun, moon, and stars. So that's how we're going to approach it. Okay, the first context is in Isaiah 13. And it's not going to mention it until verse 10, but we're going to read this whole thing because we want to understand what's going on. What's the context with which he's talking about this? A prophecy against Babylon that Isaiah, son of Amos, saw. Raise a banner on a bare hilltop, shout to them, beckon to them to enter the gates of the nobles. I have commanded those I prepared for battle. I have summoned my warriors to carry out my wrath, those who rejoice in my triumph. Listen, a noise on the mountains like that of a great multitude. Listen, an uproar among the kingdoms, the nations massing together. The Lord Almighty is mustering an army for war. They come from faraway lands, from the ends of the heavens, the Lord and the weapons of his wrath to destroy the whole country. Wail, for the day of the Lord is near. It will come like destruction from the Almighty. Because of this, all hands will go limp. Every heart will melt with fear. Terror will seize them. Pain and anguish will grip them. They will writhe like a woman in labor. They will look aghast at each other, their faces aflame. See, the day of the Lord is coming, a cruel day, with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land desolate and destroy the sinners within it. Here's verse 10. The stars of heaven and their constellations will not show their light. The rising sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. I will punish the world for its evil, the wicked for their sins. I will put an end to the arrogance of the haughty and humble the pride of the ruthless. Okay, I'm going to stop there. This is talking about the sun not giving its light at all, the moon not giving its light at all, the stars and the constellations not giving their light at all. Is this talking about a third, or is it talking about in totality, no light? So where are we at in timing? He's talking about a different time. In the trumpets, by the fourth trumpet, you still have three more. So Isaiah is not talking about when the fourth trumpet blows. It's talking about after the seventh trumpet, when the wicked remain for the last of God's wrath. For the 7 plagues, because as it is written, these are the last plagues, because with them, God's wrath is complete. God's people will not be here for that. That will occur after the resurrection. The next context is Job 9, and we're going to start at verse 5, just because I want to give you a little bit of context. It's Job is talking about God. Actually, let's start at verse 4. He's talking about God. His wisdom is profound. His power is vast. Who has resisted him and come out unscathed? He moves mountains without their knowing it and overturns them in his anger. Now, is he just talking about a physical mountain? Because a physical mountain doesn't have a brain and doesn't know that it couldn't know if it was being moved. So he's not just talking about physical mountains. He's talking about powers, influences. He shakes the earth from its place, and he makes its pillars tremble. He speaks to the sun, and it does not shine. He seals off the light of the stars. Okay, so that's just a context that we want to take a look at. And the reason I included it is because of this reference to the mountains. There's such a correlation with what Job is talking about and those trumpets. Such as the mountain, the mountain, something like a mountain being thrown to the sea. And we talked about that mountain being a power, being an influence that's being thrown to the sea, which waters in the Revelation have been established to be peoples, multitudes, languages, and nations. And what is the mountain? The mountain that's all ablaze? But Babylon. I mean, that's the mountain he's been talking about in all of Revelation. Is Babylon, counterfeit Christianity, a stick burning in the fire, a mountain all ablaze, destined to go to its destruction. But at the time of that trumpet, it's being thrown to the people. The people are exposing it. What do I do on the channel? I'm exposing the foundations. Joel 2, blow the trumpet in Zion, sound the alarm on my holy hill. Let all who live in the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming. It is close at hand. A day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and blackness, like dawn spreading across the mountains. A large and mighty army comes, such as never was in ancient times, nor ever will be in ages to come. Before them fire devours, behind them a flame blazes. Before them the land is like the Garden of Eden, behind them a desert waste. Nothing escapes them. They have the appearance of horses. They gallop along like cavalry with a noise like that of chariots. They leap over the mountain tops like a crackling fire consuming stubble, like a mighty army drawn up for battle. At the sight of them, nations are in anguish. Every face turns pale. They charge like warriors. They scale walls like soldiers. They all march in line, not swerving from their course. They do not jostle each other. Each marches straight ahead. They plunge through defenses without breaking ranks. They rush upon the city. They run along the wall. They climb into the houses like thieves. They enter through windows. Before them the earth shakes, the heavens tremble. The sun and moon are darkened, and the stars no longer shine. The Lord thunders at the head of his army. His forces are beyond number, and mighty is the army that obeys his command. The day of the Lord is great. It is dreadful. Who can endure it? Here he's talking about the fifth trumpet, the army of locusts. He says the sun and moon are darkened and the stars no longer shine. Now, that's kind of the way that's written makes it sound like it's totally dark, but we know the timing of this because in verse 12 he says, even now declares the Lord, return to me with all your heart, with fasting and weeping and mourning. Rend your heart, not your garments. Return to the Lord, for he is gracious and compassionate, slow to anger and abounding in love, and he relents from sending calamity. But here's the thing. By the time that the sun and moon and stars are darkened completely, that will have been at the seventh trumpet. The fifth trumpet is the army of locusts. The fourth trumpet is the darkening of the sun, moon, and stars. So it seems that the interpretation of this, that the stars no longer shine, that it's talking about the third of the stars that no longer shine. The thing I'm looking for here that I want to understand is, why is it? What does that signify to God that the light is going out? What does it mean to him? So this is what we're searching for. Now we're going to go to Amos 8. And we're going to go to verse 7. The Lord has sworn by himself, the pride of Jacob, I will never forget anything they have done. Will not the land tremble for this, and all who live in it mourn? The whole land will rise like the Nile. It will be stirred up and then sink like the river of Egypt. In that day, declares the sovereign Lord, I will make the sun go down at noon and darken the earth in broad daylight. Okay, now we know that he is talking about the fourth trumpet in that day, because the sun is still there. By the time the seventh trumpet blows, that sun is going to be darkened like sackcloth, and the moon is going to turn blood red. In that day, declares the sovereign Lord, I will make the sun go down at noon and darken the earth in broad daylight. I will turn your religious festivals into mourning and all your singing into weeping. I will make all of you wear sackcloth and shave your heads. I will make that time like mourning for an only son, and the end of the day like a bitter day. Okay, well, think about what's going on at that time. By the time the fourth trumpet blows, that's the last trumpet before he just starts bringing wrath on those who do not have the seal of God. So you have to be harvested in by then. You have to be living into and bearing the fruit. Doesn't really matter when you're sealed. It seems to be that people are sealed, that the multitude in white robes are sealed before the 6 trumpets blow, based on Ezekiel 9. And the 144,000 witnesses are sealed before the 4 trumpets blow, probably sealed at the same time. The reason that wording is used is because the 144,000 witnesses are not going to be here past the 4 trumpets. That's why it's worded that way. And Ezekiel 9 is talking about the multitude in white robes, because they're only going to be here for the 6 trumpets. By the time that 7th trumpet blows, they will be caught up. They will be participating in the resurrection. That's why Ezekiel does not refer to 7 quote unquote men who have that weapon. And of course, in Revelation 9, 8 and 9, when he's talking about the trumpets, he's referring to them as angels who are going to harm the earth. We're talking about the same thing here. We're just talking about 2 different remnants of the end times who are being sealed in order to be passed over. You understand? That's why they're being sealed or marked, for God. Because what he tells the angels is to destroy without showing pity, but do not touch anyone who has the mark or the seal of God. So we're talking here about this 4th trumpet where he makes the sun go down at noon, darkens the earth in broad daylight, turns religious festivals into mourning and all your singing into weeping. I will make all of you wear sackcloth and shave your heads. I will make that time like mourning for an only son, and the end of it like a bitter day. I told you before, God starts out soft and gentle, and then he increases his voice. Remember when you were little and your parents said, 1, 2, 3. All right, that's it. Sorry to yell in your ear, but I'm demonstrating something here. I'm demonstrating a parent's voice get louder and louder. Now you've incited my wrath. Now you have just overtly disobeyed me. Okay, so what is he doing here? Two things. He's raising his voice. His wrath is being incited. It's increasing. And he's calling his people in. So yeah, this is going to get worse. And what do the wicked call it? Global warming. That they're going to continue with that narrative. Another thing that I have told you is that it's very important for us to be brought into the position of grieving. Grief is extremely important to God. He tells us, grieve, mourn, lament, wail. Why? Because it brings us into position. It brings us into position to know who we are and who he is, and who we are before him and who he is before us. It brings us right-sized. We need to be in that position. So is he not going to, at the last hour, do something powerful to make us realize you had better return? So the reason I went down this road of telling you when this sealing is going to happen is to help you to understand that you don't know if you've been sealed. You don't know if you're one of the ones who's going to be saved. When Paul said you are saved if, he was letting the people know this is how you can know if you're one of the ones who's been predestined for salvation as an object of his mercy or as an object of his wrath. If you are bearing this fruit, if you are believing in the gospel that was preached to you, then you're one of the ones. If you do not, if you believed in it and then you turned from it and you no longer believe in the gospel that was preached to you, you have believed in vain. You are an object of his wrath. Okay, so you need to understand the language that's being used in order to demonstrate the concept of being able to discern the fruit. Not only in other people, you need to discern the fruit in you. You need to test the spirit in you to see who you're living by. I know what I'm doing on a daily basis, and yet God still puts me in positions to where I have to test the spirit. Why did that bad word come into my mind? What's going on there? And when I feel the grief about that, then I have to scale it back and figure out, okay, where's the chink in my armor? What have I been doing that I allowed that to occupy me? If you're doing that, if that's what happens in you, that you are something like that happens and you feel godly grief and that godly grief leads to repentance, you might be one of the ones. I might be one of the ones, provided that I continue in that godly grief, that I continue in repentance. Otherwise, I'm not one of the ones. If I can't be bothered to repent, if I don't feel bad about that, or I just say, oh, Carrie Ann, don't do that again, but I don't do anything to change, I don't sit and acknowledge that before God and examine what it is that I'm doing, that's coming out of me, that's a wicked and lazy servant. If that's what I'm doing, that is a wicked and lazy servant. All of us want to do it because it's not fun to acknowledge the evil in us. It's not fun to acknowledge that we've stepped apart from him, that we maybe exposed ourselves to something we weren't supposed to be watching. You know, that's something that happens. You start listening to secular music. Now you got an earworm, right? And that secular music keeps going on and on. You think that is by mistake? What do you think it is? When the devil keeps trying to get you to rehearse lyrics that are not of God. You think an earworm is nothing? It's something. You watched a show that you weren't supposed to watch, and people were swearing and they were cussing, and yeah, you know, you're feeling the grief of them swearing and cussing, but you don't turn it off. Those bad words are going to stay in your head. They're going to remain inside of you. You're to have nothing to do with these things. I'm to have nothing to do with those things. But how do I know that these things happen? Because I'm just as broken as you are. I'm in the same condition as you are. I know these things from experience. Ecclesiastes 12, remember your Creator in the days of your youth, before the days of trouble come, and the years approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them, before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars grow dark and the clouds return after the rain, when the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men stoop, when the grinders cease because they are few, and those looking through the windows grow dim, when the doors to the street are closed, and the sound of grinding fades, when people rise up at the sound of birds, but all their songs grow faint, when people are afraid of heights and of dangers in the streets, when the almond tree blossoms and the grasshopper drags itself along, and desire no longer is stirred, then people go to their eternal home and mourners go about the streets. Remember him before the silver cord is severed and the golden bowl is broken, before the pitcher is shattered at the spring and the wheel broken at the well, and the dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Everything is meaningless. All right. This gives us a big window into the heart of God and why it is that he gave us these things to begin with. He created us for his good pleasure. He gave us all of this in order for us to prosper, in order to flourish us, in order for him to be able to delight in us as we obey him, as we love him, as we obey his laws and statutes. Then what are his promises? You do these things, I'll prosper you. I will give you children. I'll give you cattle. I'll make the fruit, your crops produce. But now what's happening? The sun and the light and the moon and the stars are growing dark. The clouds return after the rain. How are you going to grow crops? How are you going to produce a crop without what he has given you? The sun. How are you going to enjoy without light? We're even described as children of the day, right? And children of the night are those who are of Satan. They're carousing and drunkenness and the things that they do at night so that they won't be seen, so that they'll be hidden, so that they can hide from the light, so they're not exposed. Are you feeling the heart of God in darkening these things? Because what he established is very different from what we just read in Ecclesiastes 12. This is a time of mourning. This is a time of people, I just imagine people wandering. Meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. What's the purpose, right? What's the purpose of being here? Food can't be grown. People are dying around you. Mourners go about in the street. The grasshopper, even the grasshopper drags itself along, and desire is no longer as stirred. Meaningless, meaningless. That's how people are going to feel. What did he do for us? He separated the day from the night. Like a good father, he gave us structure. Here's when you are to be awake. Here's when you are to sleep. And when you sleep, remember that rest represents rest in me. So don't start talking about insomnia. Don't start talking about the pills that you need to take from the doctor in order to put you to sleep. Because your inability to rest has nothing to do with a chemical imbalance or a need for medication. Your inability to rest has to do with a lack of peace and a spirit of fear, because God established structure for you to be awake during the day, to work the land, to understand what it means to produce a crop, the blessings that he sends, the rain in its season, the sun during the day. You understand that these things are required, are needed for life to go on. What will life be like when the light goes out? Ezekiel 32, verse 3. This is what the sovereign Lord says. With a great throng of people I will cast my net over you, and they will haul you up in my net. I will throw you on the land and hurl you on the open field. I will let all the birds of the sky settle on you, and the animals of the wild gorge themselves on you. I will spread your flesh on the mountains and fill the valleys with your remains. I will drench the land with your flowing blood all the way to the mountains, and the ravines will be filled with your flesh. When I snuff you out, I will cover the heavens and darken their stars. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon will not give its light. All the shining lights in the heavens I will darken over you. I will bring darkness over your land, declares the sovereign Lord. I will trouble the hearts of many peoples when I bring about your destruction among the nations, among the lands you have not known. I will cause many peoples to be appalled at you, and their kings will shudder with horror because of you. When I brandish my sword before them, on the day of your downfall, each of them will tremble every moment for his life. Something that also occurs to me as we're reading Ezekiel is where he talks about people bowing down to the sun. But God said before, you are not to bow to anything. You're not to bow to the sun, the moon, the stars in the heavens. You are not to make for yourself an idol in the form of anything in heaven above or on the earth beneath or in the waters below. That cross to Tammuz, what does it represent? The god of fertility, the sun god that the men are seen bowing to in Ezekiel. Let's see what those gods can do for you now. That darkening is representing God's wrath increasing a third, a third, a third. It's going to increase to the point where there is no light left on the earth or in the heavens above. Matthew 24:29, immediately follow after the distress of those days being the first 45 days of God's great wrath, when God's people are still here, after the abomination of desolation is set up. The sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. And remember that he says, so if you go out and people are saying, here he is, don't be deceived. And he says, as lightning from the east is also visible in the west. So you need to imagine what's happening right there. The sun is darkened, the moon is not giving its light, the stars fall from the skies, the heavenly bodies will be shaken. It's dark, and here comes the Son of Man. And here come his people rising to meet him in the sky. Does God know how to set a scene? Truly, the way that he describes that, when you see lightning, it's usually when things are dark or cloudy. And you see that lightning, you see it kind of flash, even if you're inside, you see it flash through your windows. Something's happening. That light's going to get your attention. Luke 21:8. Watch out that you are not deceived, for many will come in my name, claiming I am he, and the timing is near. Do not follow them. When you hear of wars and uprisings, do not be frightened. These things must happen first, but the end will not come right away. Then he said to them, nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes, famines, and pestilences in various places, and fearful events and great signs from heaven. But before all this, they will seize you and persecute you. They will hand you over to synagogues and put you in prison, and you will be brought before kings and governors, and all on account of my name. What's his name? All on account of the verbal name of Jesus Christ? No, all on account of his cause, his reason. Wait, is it all on account of his name, Yeshua? It is all on account of his name. What does his name represent? Don't think that you can do things just because you invoke a verbal name. Remember what the name is on account of his cause, his will, the will of the Father in heaven, the one who gave him that name, that cause, that purpose, that reason. And so you will bear testimony to me. But make up your mind not to worry beforehand how you will defend yourselves. For I will give you words of wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict. You will be betrayed even by parents, brothers and sisters, relatives and friends, and they will put some of you to death. Everyone will hate you because of me, but not a hair on your head will perish. Okay, he just told them that they're going to die. Many of them are going to die, but he says not a hair on your head will perish. What's he talking about? He's talking about eternal life. Stand firm and you will win life. When you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, pay attention. When you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you will know that its desolation is near. Is he talking about physical Jerusalem, or is he talking about Jerusalem, his bride? In Revelation, Jerusalem is described as the bride coming out of the sky from heaven. You are Jerusalem. We are Jerusalem. This is not a burden on the Middle East, okay? This is on God's people. Do you perceive what is happening right now in the spirit? When you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you will know that its desolation is near. What do people say about Christians? How do they talk about us? Dangerous. We're dangerous. Dangerous religious ideology, right? But they don't have a problem with Hinduism. They don't have a problem with Buddhism. You know exactly who they're talking about when they say things like that. When Hillary Clinton says that deep-seated religious beliefs are dangerous. They're dangerous. What are they dangerous to? They're dangerous to women getting full access to abortion, to being able to murder the baby God put in their womb. Deep-seated cultural codes, religious beliefs, and structural biases have to be changed. Are they talking about Hinduism? Are they talking about Buddhism? Are they talking about any of the other false satanic religions of the world? Or are they talking about Christianity? That's all they're ever talking about when they're talking about this, because that is a threat to Satan. Satan is not threatened by any of that other stuff because it's all of him. Christianity is a threat to him. And that is the only religion that Hillary Clinton is talking about. Is that a case being made against Christians? Anytime that anyone's talking about the abominations of the harlot Catholic Church, do they not always put it on Christianity? Does the Catholic Church not always put it on Christianity when they are not Christian, when they have no interest in the things of Christ? But they'll never say Catholicism did this. They'll say Christianity did this. Oh, we were a product of the time. No, they were the ones in power at the time. They established that through the spirit of Satan, by the spirit of Satan. Why are Christians being blamed for that? Because if you look at all the abominations that have occurred, it was not by God's people. It was by the harlot. All of these things in our history, they were spearheading the transatlantic slave trade. Why is that being put on white Christians? That was Catholicism. It was done for their power. It was done for their greed. The abuses of little children, colonizing, taking slaves, murder, oppression. These were done by the Catholic Church. What Christopher Columbus did was being funded by the Catholic Church. It was their agenda in Spain because Spain was bankrupt. Why is this case being set against Christians then? Well, I'll tell you in part why. Because Christians need to stand up and stop calling all of these false religions that claim to be Jews, though they are not, but are synagogues of Satan, the harlot Catholic Church and the prostitutes that bore out of her through the Reformation, who follow man, venerate man, set up statues and images, worship Tammuz through the image of the cross, lift up pagan holidays to false gods, and say that they're celebrating him to Christ. We need to stop calling that Christian. Unless you want to be lumped in with them, unless you want people thinking that you did all these things, I'm not taking responsibility for that. They might make me pay reparations or something like that, but I'm not going to, my heart is not going to take responsibility for what that harlot did, for what those who claim to be Jews, though they are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan, for what they did and continue to do in these false churches. And if we're not willing to stand up, we'll be lumped in with them. There will be a case made against us when we didn't even have anything to do with it. That has never been Christianity. But you need to know that you are considered dangerous by the world. That's the language that they use. Dangerous. Your beliefs are dangerous. And you know what counterfeit Christianity is doing right now? They want a combination of church and state where they want to force counterfeit Christianity on people. And if you don't stand up and you don't say that this is not okay, this is not what Christ did, he gives you a choice. If you don't stand for something, you'll be lumped into that. You're dangerous. I heard someone saying on a news show the other day that the minute someone says that they are religious, and by religious they mean Christian, that they automatically think that's dangerous. That's more dangerous than anything. Well, yeah, technically it is dangerous to Satan's kingdom because God is to be feared. His people are going to plunder the wicked. His witnesses are going to triumph with the blood of the Lamb over the devil. He is going to lose his place in heaven by those two things, the blood of the Lamb and the testimony of the witnesses who did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. So yeah, I can see why these armies want to surround Jerusalem. When you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you know that its desolation is near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, let those in the city get out, and let those in the country not enter the city. Now let me tell you something. Don't be confused about the timing, because he's talking about the abomination of desolation. We know that from every other book in the Gospels. So when you see the abomination of desolation, okay, he's not talking about Armageddon here. He's talking about the abomination of desolation. Different timing. Armageddon is going to be when God's people come back after the bowls of wrath have been poured out on them, and then they have gathered together for the battle of Armageddon, but Christ will come back and he will slay them with the double-edged sword coming out of his mouth. Abomination of desolation is going to happen before the resurrection, 45 days before, at least 45 days before the resurrection, at the 1290th day. And the 45 days obviously comes from blessed is the one who reaches 1335 days. That's Daniel 12. For this is the time of punishment in fulfillment of all that has been written. Okay, so that is beginning God's great wrath. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. There will be great distress in the land and wrath against this people. They will fall by the sword and will be taken as prisoners to all the nations. Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles are fulfilled. There will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars. On the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea. People will faint from terror, apprehensive of what is coming on the world, for the heavenly bodies will be shaken. At that time they will see the Son of Man in a cloud with power and great glory. When these things begin to take place, stand up and lift up your heads, because your redemption is drawing near. Do you see these things starting to build up? Abomination of desolation has not come yet, but do you see the little hints that he's dropping? Do you see the sea roaring and tossing and rising and destroying? Do you see people fainting from terror? Do you see that spirit of Satan freaking out inside of people? Are they in perplexity at the things that are happening on this earth? Don't be fooled by the soothsayers. Don't be fooled by the scientists who think that they can get a hold of this or keep telling you, you got to do this, this, and this in order for, this to stop happening. They have no wisdom. They have no understanding and no knowledge. You understand because you have the word of God. God says, return to me and I will heal you and your land. You know exactly what has been set in motion and why it is that we're seeing these things. This darkening is not a new thing. It was about noon and darkness came out over the whole land until 3 p.m, for the sun stopped shining and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Jesus called out with a loud voice, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. When he had said this, he breathed his last. The centurion, seeing what had happened, praised God and said, surely this was a righteous man. When all the people who had gathered to witness this sight saw what took place, they beat their breasts and went away. But all those who knew him, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance watching these things. And Jesus said in John 12:35, you are going to have the light just a little while longer. Walk while you have the light, before darkness overtakes you. Whoever walks in the dark does not know where they are going. Believe in the light while you have the light, so that you may become children of the light. When he had finished speaking, Jesus left and hid himself from them. Has he established light in order to help us to understand the light of Christ in us? Walk while you have the light. Today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did in the rebellion. If his invitation to rest, to enter his rest, still stands, let us not be seen to fall short of it, because there is a famine coming, and it is not a famine of bread. Amos 8:11, the days are coming, declares the sovereign Lord, when I will send a famine through the land, not a famine of food or thirst for water, but a famine of hearing the words of the Lord. But a famine of hearing the words of the Lord. That's what's coming when the light starts to go out. I will turn your feasts into mourning and all your songs into lamentation. I will cause everyone to wear sackcloth and every head to be shaved. I will make it like a time of mourning for an only son, and its outcome like a bitter day. Behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord God, when I will send a famine on the land, not a famine of bread or a thirst for water, but a famine of hearing the words of the Lord. People will stagger from sea to sea and roam from north to east, seeking the word of the Lord, but they will not find it. So you tell me, what happens when God removes the light? What happened when he removed Jesus? If his opportunity to rest still stands and you are hearing his voice, you need to respond. And there is a reason that God is telling me of why it is that he does not just get to the point, right? There's a reason why I don't just get to the point on the video. I don't just spoon feed you and tell you this is what it means, because it won't mean anything to you. We have to visit what God has said and let him build that understanding in us. There's a reason he didn't just get to the point. He had to establish certain things so that we could understand the fulfillment of what he's doing. And look what he does every time. When you pull on him, when you're seeking his truth, when you're enduring till the end, he gives you the understanding. He gives you the wisdom. That physical light is representing the light of Christ. There's going to come a time when the opportunity to enter his rest, when the opportunity to hear his voice will be removed. That light is going to be taken away. So what's happening at the fourth trumpet? What do you think is happening in the people who've not returned to him? The light's going out. By that time, that harvest has taken place, because you see that everyone else who is harmed by whatever he brings from the fifth trumpet on does not repent, does not have the seal of God. There is no more chance, there is no more opportunity to enter his rest. There are people I know who I went to school with who were, dead set on me getting baptized. People who are married to people in so-called ministry, spouses of pastors, who will not listen to the things that I say. They will not consider the things that I say. They say they will, but they don't. I know they don't, because I know that if they were bringing that to God, God would reveal it to them. He's not going to turn away anyone who goes to him. That's a promise, and I believe in the promises of God. I know the promises of God because I've been a beneficiary of them. You see that on the videos when I'm taking the time to search him and search his word and, to pursue his heart and wisdom. I know the promises of God. There are going to be people in that time who who claim they are Christian, and some of them might be really sweet, having the appearance of godliness but denying his power. They are incapable of hearing truth. They refuse. They reject it. It doesn't fit into their counterfeit Christian narrative. It does not fit into who they want to be here on earth, how they want to do things with their family, not realizing that family has been given to them by God. That's God's family. Those are God's children. We don't get to just do whatever we want. There are going to be many people who you have hoped and prayed for, in whom God's light is going to go out. He will go out of them because they have rejected him, just as King Saul was placed in a high position and ended up rejected by God. He couldn't be bothered. He couldn't be bothered to listen. That light is going to go out. That is what that represents. By comparison, if you think about the light going out in the moon and the sun and the stars versus the light going out of you, what's more scary? What is more terrifying? You not being able to hear him? You not being able to access him? You being rejected by him? Or living in physical darkness? When God sends these things, is he speaking something to you? Is there a metaphor? Is there something that he has established for you to understand? When he's doing things to your body, giving you certain sensations, illnesses, what about your feelings, your dreams? When he's doing these things, is he speaking something to you? Is he using tangible symbolism to help you to understand the spiritual reality of what you're facing? When he was using physical death with me, was he helping me to understand the spiritual death that was impending? I can tell you with 100% certainty that that's what he was doing. And you need to perceive it. You need to perceive the ways that he is talking, just as Elihu said to Job. You need to understand what's going on. I hope you've enjoyed this video on trumpet number 4. And I really hope that this has given you something to think about in terms of how you need to stand and how you need to return to him. The time is short, and we don't know at what point God is going to say enough is enough. We know that before that 4th trumpet blows, we got to be pulled in. We have to have returned to him. And that time is very short. We don't know when that's going to happen. The word doesn't tell us at what time those trumpets are going to blow within the 7-year period. But we know that the things that I've talked with you about regarding the other trumpets are already happening. We are already seeing these things. These things are already being fulfilled before our very eyes. We need to perceive and we need to respond. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.